Hi everybody, Professor Snart here. It's Friday morning. I'm just checking in, see how things are going, and move into one of my personal favorite units, just because Joseph Conrad is one of my favorite authors for a number of different reasons. And Heart of Darkness, which is what we're getting into now as far as the reading, is relatively short as far as novels go, although it's probably one of the more difficult reads that we have, despite it being relatively contemporary. It's just filled with such complexity and difficulty, although it's that, for me, and this is obviously my bias, it's kind of that it's a good difficulty. It's not just poorly written and difficult. It's a difficulty that really repays careful reading and careful rereading and careful thinking about what you're reading. So it's kind of fun in that weird, English professor kind of fun way. But anyway, so we have actually longer than, as you may have noticed in the due dates, and I've mentioned before, to get through Heart of Darkness. And so what I would suggest is that you read through the entire unit here. Unit 8 is what we're into. And then maybe look at some of the background material, and then begin reading, but maybe return to the unit at some point as you're reading to begin writing the discussion board post, or to sort of refamiliarize yourself with some of the background. So you don't need to just kind of look at the unit and then, not be part of Blackboard for a couple weeks as you read Heart of Darkness. You really want to keep both things a little bit present for yourself as we work towards the due date, which is Thursday, October 28th. I mentioned that it's usefully close to Halloween, and Heart of Darkness is one of those perfect Halloween. It's not horror by any means, although that's a funny word that shows up. But it's, very, very creepy. There's a clip in the unit from Apocalypse Now, which is an obvious choice if you know some of the background of that movie and what's happening there. But there's also the slightly lesser known Heart of Darkness movie starring Tim Roth as the Marlowe character, the main character from Heart of Darkness. And I just provided a short clip here. Maybe there's a couple, yeah. There's these weird Oriental script up in the corner that I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it's probably illegal or whatever. But if you have the opportunity, this is a really good movie just on its own, but it does a really good job of sort of bringing to life what is in many ways such a difficult text to do that with, because in addition to simply telling the story of this guy who goes up the Congo River and discovers, the famous Kurtz, in addition to just being a story about that, it's a story about so many other things that are hard to depict visually. Some of that I describe in the unit, and it's often easier to kind of write and describe this stuff than it is to verbalize it. But in the story, and what I think the movie does a good job of showing, there's this interesting way in which Marlowe, the main character, and sort of, you wouldn't want to call him the hero, but certainly ostensibly the good guy, and then Kurtz, the ostensible bad guy, begin to almost converge as this one identity as the movie progresses. And that whole metaphor of the journey is so perfectly worked in that text, as far as Marlowe's journey, the idea of telling a story as a journey that we undertake. Of course, we're reading the text, which is itself a kind of journey. All of those layers of the metaphor work so nicely together. And this is to say nothing of bigger themes that Conrad was thinking about in terms of racism, imperialism, and all of these very big kind of cultural or social themes. So Heart of Darkness is so pleasing to me to read and reread. I've read it many, many times because it works on so many levels. It sounds corny to say, but it's such a intense study of individual psychology, but at the same time, this exploration of these enormous kind of social and cultural themes. And of course, it's published right at the end of the 1800s, the turn of the century, which is such an incredible time, for good and for bad, for England or London, even more particularly, which is where the story begins, at this other famous city on the river. In terms of these big cultural and social themes, so the idea of empire at that point, it's sort of like the beginning of the end, or the end of the beginning of British colonialism, and Conrad is just deeply aware of this. But instead of writing a tract about the idea, he's able to create this narrative that's also this kind of really dark exploration of the individual psyche and how we develop moral choices and ethical choices and how we justify those. And if ultimately those justifications are completely outside of cultural norms, or if, as in the case of Kurtz, as I would argue, that he hasn't gone off the deep end, he's just applied the logic of his imperial capitalist culture to an extreme end. So in fact, he's not crazy, he's the exact opposite. He's purely rational. It's just that what's revealed, and this is what's so great about the text, what's revealed is that the roots of that rationality are crazy, the exploitation of another people and its natural resources, and this Africa as this place, or the Congo as this place, and just the sort of ownership of that because one European power has decided to own it, Belgium in this case. But anyway, I could go on. Luckily, YouTube limits me to 10 minutes, so you're lucky. So again, a couple weeks to work through this, some background material that you can, begin to look at, and then begin working through the novel and maybe return to it. I'd also be happy to answer any questions. I may even put up another discussion board, sort of like a midway point discussion board that people can post to if they're just confused or have initial reactions, or they're really excited by the text. That's allowed. That's okay too. Just to allow us to keep, a little bit of contact, so we're not completely out of it for 2 weeks and then, back into it. But as usual, be in touch if you do have questions about the unit itself, or sort of larger issues as far as the course. And I'll check in regularly, certainly by next week, just like I would, even though our due date isn't for a couple of weeks off now.